Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Yud Tes in Makos. It's written for a chemical basis for Summa Sarva Shivya. Says the Gemara at the sixth line on the page. Amar Rav Sheshes. Bikurim hanacham akeves ben kriyonachsam. You know when you bring the bikurim every year to the base of Mikdash to be eaten by the Kohanim, the bikurim are the first fruits of the seven minim, including the grains and the fruits that are from Eretz Yisrael. So you have to do two things. You have to put it down in the mizbeach. You have to put it down in the azara, rather, not on the mizbeach. You put it down in the azara. Hanacha, and you also have to read the parsha of Arami Oved Avi, the parsha that says there. So Rav Sheshes says that the bikurim Hanachas mekakim. In other words, putting them down is indispensable. If you didn't put it down, you weren't yotzei. But the reading is not. Kaman says the Gemara, who does that go? Like Yihaitan, like this time, the time Rabbi Yossi Omer. Shloshet Varim Mishum Shloshes Kanim. Rabbi Yossi said three things in the names of three different Skanim. The first one is Rabbi Shmuel Omer. Yochel Yala Adam Ma'aser Shenim Bismanas Rabbi Shalim Yochlanu. Should you be required today, if you have, say, fruits and vegetables that you grew in, or the grains specifically, the ma'aser sheni, the grains that are the rice, or the grains and the oil and the wine that you grew in Tel Aviv, let's say, do you bring it to Yerushalayim today and eat it inside the walls of Yerushalayim, the old city? You might think that you'd be chayav to do that, v'dinu, but I'll tell you why you shouldn't. Why? Bechor ton havas makam, a bechor behema, the firstborn of your flock. In any of your flock, if you have a female cow, let's say a cow or a goat or a sheep, the firstborn bechor, male animal, if it's unblemished, is brought to the base of Mikdash, given to the Kohen. V'dinu bechor ton havas makam has to be brought to the base of Mikdash. U'ma'aser sheni ton havas makam, both of them have to be brought. True, the bechor has to be brought all the way to the to the azara, given to the Kohen, to the base of Mikdash where it's sacrificed, and ma'aser sheni is brought into the Yerushalayim. It's not the same makom. One's in the Azara, one's in Yerushalayim, but both of them require bringing them. Ma b'chor ein el b'fnei bayis. Just like b'chor, we don't bring a b'chor behemoth today to shech in the base of Mikdash. It's only when the base of Mikdash is there. We'll see why. We're going to talk about that. Why not? Could you bring a b'chor today? Let's say today you knew exactly where the makom mizbeach was. You know, they don't know for sure exactly where it is. That's the whole debate as to where you can go. People who go on Har Bayis, exactly where you can go. But let's say they knew where the Mizbeach was. Maybe you could bring a carbon today. If you purified yourself and you were tahar, maybe you could. So he said like this, Ma b'chor ein el b'fnei bayis, just like b'chor is only when the base is there, not when it's not. Af ma'aser ein el b'fnei bayis. So ma'aser also. So in other words, we're making a comparison. Since bechor behema, and ma'aser sheni, which are the that you separate from your grains, right? That you bring to Yerushalayim. They both require bringing them to, let's say, Yerushalayim. Just like bechor you don't bring today. There's no base of Mikdash. The same thing with this. You don't bring ma'aser sheni today. Says the Gemara, no, ma bechor, but it's different. But you can't make a good comparison that way. Ma bechor shekain to a matan dam de murim. You can't bring the bechor because it needs putting the dam and the murim on the mizbeach. We got mizbeach, so that requires the base of Mikdash to be here. But ma'aser sheni doesn't require that. Ma'aser sheni is really, as we'll see, is really chul, and you can bring it yourself, and you can have a sandwich with it anywhere in Yerushalayim. It doesn't have kedusha to it. It doesn't have to be brought to the mizbeach. So maybe ma'aser sheni should be brought to Yerushalayim today. Why shouldn't you be able to bring ma'aser sheni to Yerushalayim today to eat it? The Gemara says, Bikurim, look at Bikurim. In other words, we want to learn out Ma'aser Sheni from Bechor, just like Bechor you don't bring today. When there's no base of Mikdash, the same thing. Ma'aser Sheni not. Well, it's different, but Bechor needs sacrificing on the Mizbeach, the Dam and the Murim on the Mizbeach, whereas Ma'aser Sheni doesn't require that. Okay, look at Bikurim. Bikurim doesn't have to be brought to the Mizbeach. Bikurim, like Bikurim is just brought there, and still you see that Bikurim are not brought Bisman Azeh. It says, Mal Bikurim Shekei to Ananocha. But Bikurim requires placing them down. Ma'aser sheni doesn't. You can come into Yerushalayim with your ma'aser sheni, take it out of your bag and eat it. You don't have to put it down in the azara, right? Tamaloma. So therefore, how do we taka know that you don't bring ma'aser sheni today to Yerushalayim and eat it? Tamalomar v'yachalta l'fnei Hashem elokecha. Pasuk says, you'll eat in front of Hashem. We quoted this pasuk before. Makish ma'aser b'chor. It says, v'yachalta l'fnei Hashem elokecha masad degan chav tiyoshev yisecha b'chor is b'chor v'tzarecha. It puts together ma'aser sheni with bechor in the same pasuk. Ma bechor ein el b'fnei abayis, just like bechor is only in front of when there's a base of Mikdash. Af ma'aser ein el b'fnei abayis. That's your drasha. Okay, why are we interested in this drasha? Because we said that Rav Sheshes said And we start off by saying Rishesha says that Bikurim requires a hanocha, but not a kriya. How do we know that? He says the Chor goes like this shita that was quoted in the name of Rabbi Shmuel, right? That he says because he said we only learn it out from the Hekesh. You can't learn it out from Bikurim. Why? Because Bikurim needs a hanacha. Wait a minute. Why doesn't it then needs kriya also? If Bikurim requires both hanacha and kriya, reading the psukim, lifrach should ask this way: Mali Bikurim shekain tunin kriya v'hanacha. Why does it say you can't learn out Ma'aser Sheni from Bechor because that requires the Matan Dam Ve'emurim? Okay, so learn it out from Bikurim. Bikurim needs hanacha. Wait a minute, needs hanacha. Why don't you say it needs kriya and hanacha if it needs kriya and hanacha? So that's a proof l'chora that it doesn't require kriya. It's not an obligation. It's only optional. Amar Rav Ashi, even if it doesn't require, if it's not indispensable, and it's not ma'akiv, you don't have to have it, but it's still mitzvah milek, it's still a mitzvah to read the psukim, so v'leima mitzvah v'lifrach. So why doesn't he say, okay, it's a mitzvah? You could say that, why can't you learn out Ma'aser Sheni from Bikurim? Because Bikurim has kriya and anacha. Enochanami, the anacha is obligatory and the kriya is not, but it still has that mitzvah. Why didn't you say that anyway? So you could have said that if that would be the case. So that doesn't prove that it's not not obligation. Even if it's not an obligation, it's a mitzvah. You could have said, well, Bikurim is different because it requires because it has kriya and anacha, even though the kriya is only optional. So why doesn't it say kriya? The reason it doesn't say kriya is even the ikar bikura a ger. If a ger brings bikurim, right, he was Megayer, and now he has a field in Tel Aviv, whatever he brings bikurim. The boy case he has to in the psukim that you read, you say Hashem Nishma Hashem Lavo Seinu, and he can't say because he's a ger. His ancestors were not promised the land of Eretz Yisrael. They can't say that. It's a little psikli, so it's not definite. So there's the reason why he doesn't say Mala Bikurim Shekain Yeshlem Hanocha and Kriya is not because Kriya is obligatory or not obligatory. Even if it's not obligatory, it's still a mitzvah. The reason it's not mentioned is because it's not always the case. It's not always that you have kriya, because if a ger is bringing the bikurim, he doesn't have the kriya because he can't read the psukim. Okay, so you don't have a braya from there, even though Rav Shesha says it says halacha. We had a machlokas about that before. Does bikurim is only hanocha ma'akev and not kriya or not? So Rav Shesha goes with the shita that it's not ma'akev. But going back to the limud itself, how do we know that Ma'aser Sheni cannot be brought today and eaten in Yerushalayim? How do we know we don't do that? You wouldn't learn out from Bechor. No, Bechor has matan dam ve'murim mizbech. Okay, learn out from Bikurim. Bikurim requires hanacha. Has hanacha. Okay, so therefore we learn out from the pasuk of Achalta Shem Sem Hekesh. Wait a minute. When you have a problem and you're trying to learn out C from A. Say no, A has got this difference. Then you say no, learn it out from B. No, B's got this difference. So then what's the usual way we do it? Then we say, let's learn out from the combination of A and B. Let's learn out from the common denominator of A and B. He doesn't go there. He says, well, we got a pasuk, we got the pasuk package. So the Gemara says, why don't you learn out from the common denominator of what? Of Bechor and Bikurim. Why don't we learn out from the common denominator of Bechor and Bikurim that they're not brought today? In the same way, Ma'aser Sheni is not brought today. The answer is Mishum Dikul Mefrach, because you can ask a kasha on the common denominator. How can you refute it? There's some mizbeach there at all. Whereas Ma'aser Sheni doesn't have to be brought into the Azara at all. Whereas the Bikurim are brought into the Azara and placed there near the mizbeach, at the foot of the mizbeach, let's say. And obviously the Bechor is brought on the mizbeach, the dam. Thinking more Mike Supper. Wait a minute. Okay, that's your answer. So you have the hekesh. But let's understand something. What does he hold about Bechor itself? Except famous machlokas, when the David and Shlomo were makdish the base of Migdash and the Azara, etc. So then when we had the destruction of the two Batei Migdash, the question was, does the Kedusha remain there? Right? That's why we don't go on Har Bayis, at least in certain spots today. Everybody agrees that there's certain areas where you can go and there's certain areas where you can't go. But there's a debate where you can go, where you can't go, certain areas, and therefore we don't know. And therefore the question is that Kedusha remains. I think La Halacha, we hold that the Kedusha of the base of Migdash remains, but Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is not the same. So the question is, when Yeshua, when they were Makadesh Eretz Yisrael, does that stay forever or not? If you're kedusha rishona, the original kedusha kitchel shata kitchel asor, it's still kadosh. So b'chor nami. If you could purify yourself, if you were able to purify yourself today, you went to the mikveh, and let's say they found a paraduma, and the paraduma, is not brought in the base of mikdash. Paraduma is brought on harazesim, right? Let's say there was a way you could purify yourself today. Today people go up there, they go to the mikveh, and they have a whole way, but they're not really 100% Torah, right? Let's say you could purify yourself today, and you had a bechor in your first thing, right? Naphtali, if your farm was brought from South Africa, you transferred it here, and you had a firstborn male, right? Firstborn male to a cow or a sheep or a goat. Could you bring it to the base of Mikdash? And could they do it? So if you're kitchen like this, level bechor nami. So why can't you bring a bechor also? Rashi says, a little bit above, I feel bechor nami. You could be yochel. You can bring a korban, even though there's no base of Mikdash, but you could be makrivit on the place of the base of Mikdash. You knew exactly where the Mizbeach was. So why can't you? Why does he say in the original? We come out, of course, you don't bring Ma'aser Sheni today, and you don't bring a Bechor today, and you don't do Bikurim today. But his question was, when you learn a Ma'aser Sheni from Bechor, Bechor is not brought today, so Ma'aser Sheni also not. Wait, why isn't Bechor brought today? If you're Kishav Shana Kishav Lavo, so Bechil Nami, Iksav Kishav Shana L'Shata V'Loki. If it's not brought, it's not Kaddish. Afilu Bechor Nami T'boy. Why do you say? How do you know that you don't bring Ma'aser Sheni today? Oh, we'll learn that from Bechor. How do you know Bechor is not brought today? So ask Kash about Bechor itself. Ravina. So in other words, if it is kadosh, so you take it, Bechor is brought today, and if it's not kadosh today, so ask about Bechor. Why do you only ask about Ma'aser Sheni? Ask about Bechor. Ravina la'olam ksav, and as Rashi again here, Rashi says biksav lo kishav shafil Bechor nami tiboy biksav kishav bias butla. Since Meiser doesn't need a bias, if it cannot. So wait a minute. If the chor is not brought, if you hold that kiddush shana kitcha below kisha loss level, so what's your question about chor? I just said. So ask about bechor. What do you mean ask about bechor? If it's not kaddish today, how can you bring a bechor? So we'll see. Rashi points out, which we're going to see in a minute in the Gemara. Rashi says you can bring it this way. Let's say there was a base of mikdash, and we're talking historically. There was a base of mikdash, and you shechted the carbon, right? You shechted the carbon, the bechor, and your makar of the dam. You did shchita kabbalah lachas rika, and then as soon as you did this rika, the enemies came and destroyed the base of mikdash, and you still have the bechor meat. Can you eat it or not? You could ask that kasha. That's what he says. Rashi says. Take a look at Rashi about halfway down the page. Since Meiser doesn't need the bias anymore, doesn't need the base of mikdash. You just bring Shem. Karina Beis of Shem Elo. Afil bechor nami kahai gavna, says Rashi. Tiboy they could go in bechor shenizrak damo, a bechor that was brought. You did the shchita kabbalah zrika, you direct them. Bechor of a bias, now the bias fell down. There's no base of mikdash. The goyim destroyed it. But dying b'sarokam, you still have the meat. Ma'ashechi, can you eat the basar there? Where, by the way, where do you eat the basar of a bechor? Bechor is kachim kalm, therefore you eat it within Yerushalayim. Doesn't mean the nation. So you have the bechor. You're running away from the fire of the base of Egypt was destroyed. You're in Yerushalayim. Now can you eat the bechor? Can you eat that too? Why do you ask about Ma'aser Sheni? Can you eat Ma'aser Sheni since it doesn't need the bias? It only needs Yerushalayim, and we presumably knew where the walls. I'm not even sure if they know where the walls of Yerushalayim are today. The original walls of Yerushalayim, right? But let's say you knew where they were. Can you eat Ma'aser Sheni there? So ask the Sheni about Bechor. You could ask that too.
You imagine the base of mikdash is burning down. You go have a mountain.
That's right. You go have a barbecue. Right. Ravina. It's a theoretical question. Ravina. La'olam k'savar k'tusha shadik v'lo kishas of level. Truth is, it's not kaddish. V'hacha. And we're talking about that case. Bechor shenizruk damo karam chorban abayis. The zrika stam was done before the chamayis. Bechor abayis. Now the bias was destroyed by dam sorokayim. Umakshina besaro ledamo. How do you know? So that's our question. Our question should be: so maybe why do you say you don't eat the basar? Maybe you would eat the basar in a case like that. In a similar case of Ma'aser Sheni, where it doesn't need the bias anymore because you already did the shchita kabbalah chazrika. And the answer is the reason you know that. How do we know that you don't eat the basar? Because we have a hekesh between the basar and the dam. Ma damo, right? The pasuk in the same pasuk as dama yizrok, and then you eat it. Madama b'mizbeach, just like the dam is on the mizbeach, a basar mizbeach. The basar is only eaten when there's a mizbeach. That's what he means. Rashi brings down because the pshit lady is not eaten. This kish basar dam. It says ves damam tizrok al mizbeach uvesaro yeh lechem lecha to eat. Right. So there's a hekesh between the two. So just like Just like you wouldn't eat the meat in that case, because if there's no, just like the dam has to be on mizbeach, basar also has to be when there's a mizbeach. Okay, so we learn out basar from dam, umakish meiser lebechor, and now we compare meiser bechor in the pasuk we quoted before. Just like bechor is not eaten when there's no base of mikdash, the same thing, but meiser also not. So the Gemara, wait a minute. So isn't this a case of learning out B from A and C from B? You're learning out basar from dam, and then you're learning out the basar bechor from dam bechor, and then you're learning out C, which is meiser sheni from bechor, and that's a problem when it comes to kachim. Remember that chart that we have that you don't learn out like when it comes to kachim. If you learn out B from A via hekesh, you can't then go learn out C from B. For those who recall, here's our chart that I handed out when we learned Zvachim Daf Mem Tes, the chart that if you learn a Dov Hekesh, if you learn out B from A by a Hekesh when it comes to Kachim, you cannot further go and learn out C from B. So if you learn out Basar Bechor from Dama Bechor, you're not entitled to learn out C, which is my standing from there. The answer is Meiser Dagan Chulani. Meiser Dagan is not Hegdish. It's not Hegdish. It's Chulin. It's just a rule that you have to eat it in Yerushalayim. But it's not hegdish. That's fine if you go, when you say you can't learn out C from B after learning out B from A, do you learn out the thing that's learned out, the outcome, the object of the learning? And are you talking about looking at C from B and B from A? You're learning out that? Or you're looking at B. B is Kaddish. A and B, what A was the dam of the Bechor, B was the basar of the Bechor. Those are kadosh. Even though C, Meiser Sheni, might not be considered kadosh, but if you look at based on the thing that you learned, that the source, if you're learning at A and B are kadosh, you still have a problem. If A, B is learned out from A, you cannot go and learn out C from B. Mike, what are you going to say there? Dam basar chadam milsa. The answer is don't learn it as a hekesh. It's not that basar is learned out from dam. Basar and dam are the same thing, the same animal. We're talking about the same bechor, therefore it's only considered one. So even though you can't have three, you can't learn out B from A and then follow that by C from B by kachim, but here A and B is really one thing, so it's like one unit. Now, the Mishnah, to take a quick look at the Mishnah back on Yud Gimel, the first Mishnah in this parak. And the first Mishnah in the parak said, if you look at the Gemara there, it says 6 lines from the bottom of the page. We're listing all things that you bring, that you get malchus for. 6 lines from the bottom of the page in the Mishnah, it says, "Umaiser sheni v'hekta shelo niftu." Right? Meiser sheni. If you eat meiser sheni out of Yerushalayim, presumably, right? Out of Yerushalayim, presumably. Meiser sheni. What do you do with meiser sheni? Let's understand that very clearly. Meiser sheni, you have it in Tel Aviv or Haifa or Modi'in or any place else. You're mafresh, right? You give Meiser Rishon, you give Truma to the Kohen, you give Meiser Rishon to the Levi. The Levi then has to take Trumas Meiser from his Meiser Rishon and give that to the Kohen. Meiser Sheni, in years 1, 2, 4, and 5, you bring to Yerushalayim and eat it there. So here it says Meiser Sheni, and you weren't, let's say you want to bring it to Yerushalayim, it's very heavy, you got truckloads, so you change it into money. If you didn't change it into money, you can't eat it outside of Yerushalayim. If you ate it, that's your malchus. That's the chorah, what the malchus is. Umaiser sheni shelo niftu. That's what it says on your gimel. Now, keeping your finger there, look at the Mishnah that we're dealing with now, the Mishnah we had on Friday, on Yud Zayin, Daf Yud Zayin. What does it say there? In the second line of the Mishnah, Kachin Kal, Umaiser sheni. Umaiser sheni, chutz l'choma. Again, that's Meiser sheni. You ate it outside of Yerushalayim being poted. So effectively, this Mishnah is redundant. You just said Meiser Sheni. You said Meiser Sheni on Yud Gimel in the Mishnah there, and you said Meiser Sheni here too, if you ate it outside of the wall, outside of Yerushalayim. So why are you telling you this twice? That's what we're going to deal with in the Gemara twice. Kachim is back now in the Gemara, back on your Testament base, the 4th line. Tanita Charazimna. Why do you tell me over here Kachim Meiser Sheni Shelo Niftu in our Mishnah on Yud Zayin? That's what we're dealing with right now. Meiser Sheni, rather, Kachim Kal Meiser Sheni Chutz L'choma. Meiser Sheni. What are you talking about? We already had it back in Gimel. Tanita Charazim, the Meiser Sheni v'hekta shelo niftu. That's quoting the Mishnah on Yud Gimel. Meiser Sheni v'hekta shelo niftu. You already mentioned Meiser Sheni. Rav Yossi, there's 2 different cases of Meiser Sheni. Rav Yossi Chanina, Sefer Meiser Sheni Tor v'Gavra Tor. Our Mishnah Yud Zayin is speaking about regular Meiser Sheni that was pure, could be eaten, and the man was pure. If he eats it outside of Yerushalayim, we're going to see later on this page an interesting thing. It's not when you first separated it, you burned it in trucks and you're bringing it to Yerushalayim and you didn't get into Yerushalayim that you're chayiv. You're only chayiv if it came into the Yerushalayim and then you took it out. That's what we're talking about. If you ate it outside of Yerushalayim without bringing it to Yerushalayim yet, that's only an Isser Rabbanan. This Doraisa says if you brought it into Yerushalayim and then took it out, you have to eat it in Yerushalayim. But we'll see. But we're talking about regular Meiser Sheni. You're pure. The Meiser Sheni is pure, and you're eating outside the Choma. There you're chayiv malchus. Reisha, again, if you brought it into Yerushalayim first. Reisha, back in your Gimel, the first Mishnah, the Meiser Sheni Tamei v'gavar Tamei. The whole thing was Tamei. Without being poted. In other words, what are the rules of Meiser Sheni? Let's understand. As we'll see later on, you have to bring it into Yerushalayim. Let's say if you didn't bring it to Yerushalayim, you could be poted into cash, coins, and then buy stuff with it in Yerushalayim. Once you bring the food into Yerushalayim, you can't be poted anymore, right? You had to be poted outside of Yerushalayim. Outside of Yerushalayim, you can't eat it. You could be poted. In Yerushalayim, you can't be poted anymore, but you could eat it. That's regular Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni, which is Tamei, you can't eat it. But what do? You could bring it, even in Yerushalayim, you could be poted. So he says that's what I mean over here. The first Mishnah, Yud Gimel, the last Mishnah, our Mishnah, Yud Gimel, speaking about regular Meiser Sheni, you ate it outside of Yerushalayim after it was brought into Yerushalayim. Reisha and Yud Gimel is speaking about Meiser Sheni Tamei v'gavar Tamei. It's Tamei that the Meiser Sheni is Tamei, the person's Tamei, and you're eating in Yerushalayim, which you're not allowed to. You have to be poted in Yerushalayim and with the coins buy regular good food. How do you know you're chayiv tamei? How do we know the first Mishnah? In other words, we're explaining that the Mishnah in Yud Gimel, when it says over there that Meiser Sheni v'egder shelo niftu, we're talking about Meiser Sheni that was tamei, and you had it in your shalayim, you have to be poted. You can't eat it while it's tamei. How do we know you can't eat it? Now the Gemara deals with that. The time of Shimon Omer, pasuk is lo biarti mana b'tamei, when you have to get rid of the Meiser Sheni, right? In the end of before Shemitah, or in the end of the 3rd and the 6th years, when you make that whole that whole process, and you read the pasuk and you say lo biarti mana, I didn't consume it, I didn't get rid of it when I was tamei. Bein shani tamei v'uta, whether I was tamei and the produce was pure. Bein shani tor, whether I was tor v'utamei and the Meiser Sheni was defiled. So that's what says that you can't, you're not allowed to deal with, you're not allowed to eat it, you can't do anything with it when you're tamei. Where does it say you can't eat it? Any odea. The Gemara says, I don't know where it says that, right? Any odea. So the Gemara says, what do you mean you don't know? Tumas aguf behediksiv, it says beferish, you can't eat it while you're tamei. Nefesh ki ashia tigabo, a person who touches, let's say, a dead body, but tamei out of arav, a dead carcass, whatever, if you animal, and you're tamei out of arav. So obviously you can't eat anything which is holy. And even though we said Meiser Sheni maybe doesn't have the same kedusha as a bechor, but it still has some kedusha to it. How do we know if the food itself, the grains itself, the Meiser Sheni grain, if that's tummy, how do we know? So the Sivit says like this: pasuk we had the other day. What's the halal? By a bechor that has a mum. Bechor as a mum is not brought as a carbon, obviously, right? And you can't exchange it for something else. Another one's not a bechor. So it says you eat it. What does it say? Just like water. You could eat it together. It's like plain water. And that's it. You said you can't sell the meat. You can't deal with it like buy it and sell it. You can't shear it and stuff like that. It has kedusha. But what does it mean? The tamei yachdav? A person who's tamei, who's eating the meat together in one plate with the person who's tor, well, he's going to be tamei the meat, right? He's going to tamei the meat because he's tamei. So then the other guy, the Torah person, can eat it, even though the meat's tamei. So what do you see? Tanya Rishmal, afilu tamei v'Torah ochel mikor achas. Even a tamei and a Torah person can eat in the same plate. Well, if a tamei and a Torah person are eating food in the same plate, the tamei person is going to defile the meat, and then the Torah person is going to eat defiled meat. That's okay. You could see that. So it's bein choshen, no concern about that. You're allowed to do it together. Become rachmana. This that you're allowed to do where by a bechor balmum, that you shecht it, it's not a carbon. You just shecht it and you could eat it together. You could eat it tamei. Kam rachmana. Heyech tamei deshari lecha. This thing that I was matzah to you, gabei tor Hasam gabetar hasam acho gabetar hasam. Just like what I told you, the bechor bamum. This meat that you're allowed to eat when you are tame, when you are tar, you're allowed to eat it if it's tame, as we just said. A bechor bamum, you're allowed to eat it even if it's tame. A tar person can eat it. Halcha lo techel over here by what? Lo sucha lecha b'sharecha. Why? Because you have the word b'sharecha twice. Lo sucha b'sharecha. Don't eat mice. This kind of mice. Don't eat mice or b'sharecha. What does that mean? The b'sharecha that it says by bechor balmum that you're allowed to eat it when you're when it's tame and you're tar. You're allowed to eat tame bechor balmum. You can't eat mice sheni that's tame. So here's the point that this shows you that you're not allowed to eat mice sheni when you're tame and it's tar. Or when it's tame and you are tar, you're not allowed to eat it. So that's your source. And that's what we mean over here in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Ma'aser Sheni Shalom Niftu. Ma'aser Sheni was in Yerushalayim. It was tame. And you didn't redeem it. You ate it that way. For that, you get malchus by eating it. How do you know you're allowed to be poda in Yerushalayim? Remember, regular Ma'aser Sheni food that you bring to Yerushalayim, you're tar, it's tar. You can't be poda in Yerushalayim. You could be poda. You could change it into money outside of Yerushalayim. You can't change it to money in Yerushalayim. But before, but a ma'aser sheni that's tameh, you could be poted even in Yerushalayim. How do we know that? How do you know you could be poted? You can change it into money. The Pashut is speaking about you have a lot of ma'aser sheni. You got truckloads. You can't schlep it all to Yerushalayim, so you can't carry it. The Pashut teaches lo tuchal says you can't carry it. But the drasha is ain't say salachil. It really means you can't eat it. Shneimar the pasuk says by Yosef and his brothers, Vayisa Masos Meis Panel. They took foods. They took portions of food. So seis means food. Lo sichos mean you can't eat it. Why can't you eat it? Because it's tameh. And we just explained the psukim saying you can't eat it when it's tameh. Okay. So he says over here. So how do you know you could be poted? How do you know you could be poted? So he says you can't eat it. Pasuk says, and as the pasuk shait is that if you can't carry it, you could be poted into money. But the drasha here is so you can't eat it because it's tameh. If you can't eat it because it's tameh, what do? You change it into money. That shows you that if it's tameh, you could change it into money. Amar Abasi, he says a different drasha. How do you know the Pashut Pshat? How do you know? How do you know that Ma'aser Sheni? I brought it from Tel Aviv. I'm schlepping. And right before I come to Yerushalayim, I'm one step out of Yerushalayim. How do I know that I could still be poted onto money there? Doesn't have to be poted in Tel Aviv. Even if I'm one step out of Yerushalayim, I could change it into money. Because you can't schlep it in. We just use that to tell me that if it's tameh, you could be poted in Yerushalayim. How do you know that it's we already used that pasuk? We just explained you can't eat it because it's tameh, so you could be poted. How do you know it also means if you can't schlep it in, you could, as long as you're outside of Yerushalayim, you could be poted even when it's Torah. If it was only for a blazer's drush, you should have said you can't eat it because it's tameh. Then you could be poted. If you can't eat it, you could be poted. My say so. Why is it telling me say so? Telling me that what? My say so. Why does it say so? To tell me that even if you can't shep it, maybe it's entirely for this drasha of you can't take it into Yerushalayim. How do you know it's also for you? If it became tummy that you can't eat it. Zim came litlo. Could it just say you can't? It's hard for take it in. My say so. The word says has a double meaning. It has number one, you can't eat it because it's tummy, and you can't schlep it. You could bring it in there too. Yasser Rav Chanina Rav Hoshia. Rav Chanina and Rav Hoshia were sitting. Different years over here. It could be boile pisur Yerushalayim. It sounds like the way they were debating this issue. They had this question as they were sitting at the doorway at the gate of Yerushalayim. But in the meaning of the pasuk, obviously, it should really mean they were debating if you were at the gate of Yerushalayim with your ma'aser sheni. What's the halacha there? Outside of Yerushalayim, you could be poted. Inside of Yerushalayim, you can't be poted anymore. You have to eat it. If you were about if you're at the gate, in other words, one girsa is in the Bachi has the girsa. Rav Chanina, we can boil it. He says, they were sitting at the door of Yerushalayim. Maybe that's what it was. They were sitting at the door and say, what about right here? If I have the Ma'aser Sheni right here, can I bring it into Yerushalayim? Do I have to bring it into Yerushalayim? Or can I still be part of it? This is the drasha. He said, listen, if let's say the food is outside of Yerushalayim, it's a step or two away, and you're inside Yerushalayim. I'm sorry. If the man is outside, let's say you're at the gate of Yerushalayim, you paid your entrance fee or whatever, you're at the gate, and you put the food inside, and you still had some more stuff, you went back to get some more stuff. So if the food's inside Yerushalayim, and what? And in Maso B'fnim, the package, let's say the package is inside and you're outside, Kaltu Mechitzas. Obviously, the walls of Yerushalayim have already absorbed it, right? They've already absorbed it. They've already seized the package. So obviously, once the food is in Yerushalayim, you can't be poter anymore. You have to eat it in Yerushalayim. What happens if he's inside? He's inside. He's got a big sack over his shoulder. He's already inside the wall, but the sack is still outside. What do you say there? Tanalu Hausaba, one of the elders there, but the Rav Shimon at the yeshiva of Shimon darshan like this: Ki yirchak mimcha makom, when the place is far from you. What does that mean, mimcha? Just say if you're far away from Yerushalayim, ki yirchak mimcha darshan mimilu echa, from your fullness. Meaning the way Rashi learns, the Rambam learns the other way around, but Rashi learns from your fullness, meaning your fullness means you with your packages, basically. In other words, if you and your packages are far away from all of you, if you're far away, then if you're outside of Yerushalayim, then you could be poted. But if you're inside Yerushalayim, even if your package is outside, but it's attached to you, then you're already considered inside and you can't be poted anymore. What happens if you've got it hanging on a stick? It's not like on your body, in your fullness with you. If it's you got it on a rope or something or on a stick, and the stick is way outside of Yerushalayim, and you're inside, what do they take? That question stands. We'll see if we posted it before the end of the day. Does he stand outside? Ram learns the other way around, but okay, this is how Rashi learns. Amar Vasi, Amar Yochanan. Now here we come to this halacha, which when you learn Ma'aser Sheni, regular, if you don't know this halacha, Rambam Paskins like this halacha, you would know that we always learned that if you have Ma'aser Sheni, you designate it in Haifa or Tel Aviv. If you eat it on the way, you're chayiv for that. You're not allowed to eat Ma'aser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim. When are you chayiv for eating it outside of Yerushalayim? That's only if it came inside Yerushalayim. If it saw the interior walls of Yerushalayim, you already brought it into Yerushalayim, and then you took it out, you can't eat it there, right? But if it never came in, that's only in a Sudrabanan. That's what Rav Yochanan says. My time. Before God, you should eat it. You can't eat it bisharecha, right? That goes on. It's the same parsha, the same pasuk. You can't eat it in your gates, meaning in Tel Aviv or Haifa. You have to eat it in Yerushalayim. But where it was already lifnei Hashem lekecha, meaning it already was exposed, let's say, to lifnei Hashem lekecha, to the inside walls of Yerushalayim. Then wherever you could say, in other words, when it's already been exposed to the interior walls, to the interior of the walls of Yerushalayim, then you're not allowed to eat it outside. But if it's never been inside the walls, it's never been exposed to the inside of Yerushalayim, then there's no that you can't eat it in Tel Aviv. It's only if it's already been exposed to the inside of the city of Yerushalayim.
It's hard to reveal.
Pardon?
Before you get to Yerushalayim with this, I'm asking if Ma'aser Sheni, is it mutar lechol?
No. It's a drabanan. It's mutar d'oraisa, asur drabanan. Mutar. That's what he's saying. He's saying it's only when are you chayiv? You're only chayiv if it already came inside. Yeah, outside of Yerushalayim, well, you shouldn't do it. It's drabanan. It's drabanan. It's obvious asur to do, but midaraisa, there's no chiyuv. Meisvei. Okay, now we have a kasha on that. Rabbi Yossi Omer, listen to this. Kohen should also be ototena. A Kohen got a hold of a fig. Shel tevel. It hasn't been yet, even though figs are only, the tevel is only drabanan, but it's still, you have a fig that you didn't take trumas and maisus yet. Omer, he said, listen, tenazu, I want to take trumas and maisus. He's got one fig, and he says, I'll take truma b'uktzah. Truma should be designated from its stem in the bottom. Ma'aser rishon b'tzfona. Ma'aser rishon will be designated in the north. Ma'aser sheni l'droma. Ma'aser sheni at the south of that. And as he's being mafresh parts of this fig, like he's supposed to do, truma, ma'aser rishon, ma'aser sheni, vishnas ma'aser sheni. If it's a year of ma'aser sheni, v'hu b'Yerushalayim, and now he is in Yerushalayim. O ma'aser ani, or if it's ma'aser ani v'b'gvulim. Let's say it's a year of ma'aser ani, which is what, the 3rd and the 6th years, right? And he's now outside of Yerushalayim. Achla, and he eats it. Loka achas, he gets malchus. Why does he get malchus? You know why? Because he designated ma'aser rishon, he designated truma, he designated ma'aser rishon, designated ma'aser sheni, but he didn't designate Trumas Meiser Rishon, right? The Trumas, usually Meiser Rishon goes to the Levi. Kohen could eat it also, but you have to take Truma from that before he eats it. The Kohen or the Levi would have to take Truma Gedola, 1/10 of the Meiser, 1/10 of a tenth, before he eats it. So he'd get more Malkus. Zar Sha'achla, if he was a non-Kohen eat it, Lokashtayim, right? He's going to, so therefore, what's the first Malkus for? Loka Achas, the Kohen would get Malkus for what? For eating Meiser Rishon that didn't have Truma Gedola taken from it, which means that it's what? It's Tevel. Right, Meiser Rishon, that you didn't take Truma from it, the Trumas Meiser is Tevel. He's chai for eating Tevel. If he's a Zar, he's chai for eating Truma also. Right, if he eats the whole fig, he's chai for eating Truma because he can't eat it. A Kohen can eat Truma. Part of the fig has Truma in it because he designated Truma, designated Meiser Rishon, designated Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani. So if he's a Kohen, he's going to get Malkus for eating Tevel because Trumas Meiser is still in there. If he was designated Trumas Meiser also, it would be Mutter. Did everything. Truma, Meiser Rishon, Trumas Meiser Rishon, and Meiser Sheni. Okay? And we had the other day that you get Malkus for eating it even if you didn't take Meiser Sheni. Here he does Meiser Sheni. So the Kohen would get one, if he didn't designate Trumas Meiser, he'd be Trumas Meiser. He would get Malkus for eating Tevel. Zor she'achla lokashtayim. He would get one for eating Tevel and for eating Truma. She'ilu betchila achla eina loka elachas. Let's say he didn't designate anything. The whole thing's Tevel. You only get one Tevel. That's all. The only answer would be for eating Tevel. If you did it b'mezid chayv misbei shemayim. But let's say you get Malkus here, right? So if he didn't designate anything. But since it was partially designated, there's Truma in there, the Trumas Meiser, which wasn't designated, and it's Tevel. And there's Truma, because he designated Truma, and he didn't designate Trumas Meiser, so that's Tevel and Truma. Time at Isa Yerushalayim. Oh, so this is the drasha. The reason is because he's in Yerushalayim. Habugvul, let's say he's outside of Yerushalayim, Lokashoshi would get Mashma, you get 3. 2, because he's in Yerushalayim. What do you mean? Even though apparently he doesn't say even though he didn't take it inside. In other words, when do you say you're chayiv? When do you say we just said what did we start off by saying? Ravasi, you said the name of Yochanan. You're only chayiv for eating Meiser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim if it first came in, right? But here it says, okay, if he's in Yerushalayim, he's going to be chayiv for eating Tevel and for eating Truma, the Zar. Smashma that he was outside of Yerushalayim, he'd be 3 for eating Meiser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim because he's eating in the fig as Meiser Sheni too. But he didn't come inside. He's chayiv for eating 3. He's chayiv 2 because he's in Yerushalayim, so he's eating it inside. But if he was outside of Yerushalayim, mashma he would get 3. Why would you get 3 for eating Meiser Sheni also? In other words, Tevel, Truma, and Meiser Sheni, even though it didn't come inside. The answer is it's speaking about, you could say that it's speaking about where he took it into Yerushalayim and then took it out. He took it out, then he'd be chayiv for eating Truma, Tevel, and Meiser Sheni outside Yerushalayim. So what's the chiddush in that? What's the chiddush in all this? Obviously, there's Truma here, there's Tevel, there's Meiser Sheni. What's the chiddush? If you tell me that the chiddush is what? That you're chayiv Meiser Sheni even though it never came into Yerushalayim, okay, that could be a chiddush. But if it came into Yerushalayim and then took it out, what's the chiddush over here? You give me a weird case. A Kohen had one fig. He separated off Truma, Meiser Rishon, and Meiser Sheni. And if a Zar ate it now, in Yerushalayim, you chayiv 2. Out of Yerushalayim, you had 3. If it came into Yerushalayim and took it out, what's the chiddush? When it came into Yerushalayim, he hadn't separated it yet. He brought it into Yerushalayim. It was still brought it when it was Tevel. He had all these things that the Kohen did, that he separated off Truma and Meiser Rishon and Meiser Sheni was in Yerushalayim. In other words, the basic idea is that you're chayiv eating Meiser Sheni if you designated it outside of Yerushalayim. You brought it into Yerushalayim and then took it out. The chiddush over here is he didn't designate it yet. He brought it into Yerushalayim, not having designated anything. He hadn't separated off all these things. And the chiddush is that's the chiddush. Says Gemara, is that really the case? This was mentioned by Rav Yossi, this kasha. Rav Yossi, but our basic question is answered. Speaking about you took it in Yerushalayim, you took it out. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is that even though you brought it in, it hadn't separated the stuff off yet, but it's considered as if it is. Says Gemara, is that really the case? Does Rav Yossi really hold that matanos that were not separated off is considered as if they were separated off? It's as if you brought the Meiser Sheni literally into Yerushalayim and took it off. Rav Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Mishum Rav Yossi said the name of Rav Yossi, asking Kash Rav Yossi on Rav Yossi. I'll pay. Let's say you had produce that wasn't yet ripe, if it was something right, or if it was grain, it hadn't been chayiv and meiser sheni yet because he hadn't yet, done the winnowing and the making it in a pile, etc. He hadn't been chayiv and trumas and meisers yet. So peiros shalodig melachim, peiros that have not been fully processed yet, and they pass Rabbi Shalom, they pass Yerushalayim, you could still be potted outside. We know that meiser sheni you cannot redeem once you're in Yerushalayim, but if they haven't been duly processed yet, and they happen to pass through Yerushalayim and out of Yerushalayim, you can still be poted, right? Everybody agrees to that. In other words, that normally once the fruits have come into Yerushalayim, you have to eat them. You can't be poted anymore. You can't take it out of Yerushalayim and eat it. We said that the issur of eating it outside of Yerushalayim is only if it first came into Yerushalayim. The issur of being poted is if it came to Yerushalayim and it was Yerushalayim absorbed it, you can't take it out of Yerushalayim anymore and be poted. Okay. Everybody agrees, though, that if the fruits are not fully processed yet, you could take it to Yerushalayim. If it passed through Yerushalayim, you could still be poted. You have to ma'aser Yerushalayim. You could eat it. You could be poted outside. In other words, the fruits weren't fully processed yet, right? They weren't fully ripe or they weren't fully processed. They passed through in a truck in Yerushalayim or a wagon, and they came out of Yerushalayim. You could still be poted there. You could eat it outside. You took it back outside to Modi'in, whatever, and you could be poted and eat the fruits and bring the money back to Yerushalayim. Where's the machlokas besel and beshamai? I'll pay shnig fruits, produce that they were fully processed, meaning they're chayiv and trumas and meisus. V'avu b'Yerushalayim, they passed through Yerushalayim. So Beishamai says yachzor ma'aser sheni Yerushalayim. Once it passed through Yerushalayim fully processed, even though you hadn't separated the stuff off, you hadn't separated meiser rishon, meiser sheni, etc. But if it passed through Yerushalayim fully processed, that's it. You can't be poted anymore. You can't take it out of Yerushalayim and change it into money. Ubeisula Ram Yifta, and Yerushalayim says you could be poted. V'yochal b'chol makom shu, you could be poted even though it was fully processed. But since you hadn't yet separated off, you could. Rashi points out that Beishamai b'makom Beisil ain't a mishnah. We have to go like Beishamai, like Beisilo. You go like Beisilo. So Rabbi Yossi says Beisilo says that even though if it was fully processed, the food already and passed through Yerushalayim, even though you hadn't separated off, you could still be poted outside. So he doesn't say matana shelo hormu. It's not like they were already processed, because he says matana shelo hormu is not hormu yet, meaning it hasn't been separated off, and therefore it's not meiser sheni until you separate it physically. It's not meiser sheni, and therefore you should be able to take it out of Yerushalayim and be poted again there. If you say Rabbi Yossi holds, that's the chiddush over here. Rabbi Yossi holds that matanas, even though they weren't separated off, it's as if they were separated off. So that means if you bring it in a tevel state, it's like you have meiser rishon and trumas and meiser sheni all separated off. If you said hakotu mechitzas, so why do you say these? Why does Beisil say that produce which is fully processed and came through Yerushalayim, but you hadn't separated off meiser rishon, meiser sheni yet? You brought it in a state of tevel. If you took it out of Yerushalayim, now you could still be poted. You could still designate it now meiser sheni and be poted. Hi, what do you mean? Matan shelo humors kamishur b'dami. Amaraba mechitza lechel daraisa, that once it comes into the walls of Yerushalayim, that you can't eat it outside of Yerushalayim anymore. That's min haTorah. Mechitza liklot rabbanan. The mechitza, once it comes in, that you can't be poted anymore. That's only a rabbanan. Mechikas rabbanan, when the rabbanan goes that you can't be poted anymore. Ki isa b'einei, when it's in its state, when it's already meiser sheni, you separate it up. The tavle lo goes rabbanan, when it's still tavle goes rabbanan. In other words, what we said before was talking about when the Kohen with the fig was speaking about, you want to eat it. You want to eat it outside? No, you can't eat it outside. The chiddush is, even though it came in a state of tevel, you haven't separated it off yet. When it came to Yerushalayim, still it's like as if it's separated off, and therefore you can't eat it outside of Yerushalayim. But if you want to take it out of Yerushalayim and be poted, you poted onto money, change your mind, that you could still do. That's what it means over here. Here we're talking about this little Misham is talking about, can you take it out of Yerushalayim, even if it's fully processed, but you brought it into Tevel, you brought it into Yerushalayim in a state of Tevel, and you took it out in a state of Tevel. It's not considered Meiser Sheni yet, and you can still be poted, but you can't eat it anymore. If you designate it now as Meiser Sheni, you can't eat it anymore outside Yerushalayim, because Matana Shlomo Kamisha or B'domi, at least in terms of eating it, in terms of being poted, you can still be poted. Ravina gives a different answer to the whole question. Ravina is looking at the question, he says, what do you mean? How, if it's in Yerushalayim and if it's in Yerushalayim and you're out, if it's outside Yerushalayim, how could you be? How could you be? What we get malchus for? We just said we started by saying that you're only chayiv malchus if you eat it if it came into Yerushalayim. Here was we made a diak and we said outside of Yerushalayim you're chayiv 3 for eating ma'aser sheni outside of Yerushalayim, but it didn't come into Yerushalayim yet. So we gave an answer. You brought it in and you took it out, and the chiddush is that matanos lo mekayim Yerushalayim. This is very simple. The question that Rav Papa asked before. Let's say you're in Yerushalayim, you came in and you got the ma'aser sheni on a stick with a bag. Your sack of food is on a big stick. You got a 12-foot stick, and that's outside of Yerushalayim. What do you say there? That's the chiddush is. The chiddush is, what's the chiddush? If you said that it didn't come in, the answer is you came in, it didn't come in. And the chiddush there is that reading the last Rashi before the Mishnah. Well, it's the chiddush is the first of the wide lines in the Rashi. The command since even though it's on a stick and it's outside, it's as if it came in. You can't eat it anymore if you took it outside. But the question before we said. If the sack is on your shoulder and you came into Yerushalayim, the Saba, the elder said, no, it's like it came into Yerushalayim the way Rashi learns, and therefore you can't be potent anymore. You have to eat it. And Papa, what happens if it's on a stick and the sack is hanging outside of Yerushalayim? You're in Yerushalayim. He wasn't poshed so. He says, no, here he was poshed the Shaila. How are you chayiv a big vulim 3? The answer is because you came into Yerushalayim. The bag was outside on a stick, and the chiddush is that it's as if it came in, and if you ate it now, it's as if it came into Yerushalayim. If you ate it now, you're chayiv for eating ma'aser sheni outside of Yerushalayim. Even though we learned that you only can be chayiv for eating it if it came into Yerushalayim, this is considered as if it came into Yerushalayim, and Rav Papa's question that raised before is decided. All right, pick up here tomorrow from the Mishnah tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, tomorrow, and the next day are Rosh Chodesh, Chodesh Tov L'Kulam, and a safe trip back for Yomi. Mitzvah Shem. Safe trip back. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.